Hello, it's Joyful Hermit, and I've been thinking through many things, including still about the privately professed consecrated hermit as opposed to the canonically approved status of a hermit within the Catholic Church. And some things have come to light in my own life and in my own diocese that I guess reinforce some of my thoughts and realities. I guess I have always had a way of looking into things and seeing more the reality of it. But as I was mentioning the other day about canon laws and why they are created, and the shift in the hermit life, which for centuries went along with, I guess, basically certain wisdoms about it from those who had lived it for many, many years, and the reasons why, even from the Old Testament times. And then in about, I think it was 1917 or 1918, more laws were created, and then again in 1983 they were revised, making changes for who could be and who could not be, I guess, established or given the status of a hermit in a diocese legally. However, what I have come to observe as the reality, at least throughout the United States, with I think there are 297 bishops or anywhere close to 300, and how it runs the gamut of who is canonically approved and who is not, a lot of times based upon the interpretation of two very short inclusions in canon law describing the hermit life, based upon two relatively small inclusions in the Catechism of the Catholic Church describing hermit life, and within that catechism also describing the privately professed consecrated hermit as being a valid hermit within the church. But I have found that depending on the diocese, depending on the bishop, and their interpretation of, and then of course there are more legalities that have developed, such as one that someone under the age of 30 should not be considered for hermit life, and a multitude of other laws or rules. But these are gotten around by different bishops or run the gamut from perhaps a very young person, or maybe older, or someone who has lived the hermit life for years and years and then applies, or someone who is not. Anyway, some hermits end up being maybe very progressive or involved with dissenting type Catholics. It just runs the gamut there again. It's not, nothing is really tried and true or kept within the bounds that are created. And that's the same with the secular world. Laws are created. We have judges then that interpret them in quite a wide spectrum within that interpretation. So I find it just comes again to be rather a complicated process. And ironically, the other night I had watched a movie of Saint Charbel, a hermit, and one of the lines that really struck me that his superior said to the other brothers and monks in his monastery when Charbel was allowed to live the hermit life and to go off to his hermitage. Charbel at that point was maybe in his 50s. I don't know. I have books on him that I've read, and I don't remember the detail of his age when he became a hermit. But his beard was gray and white, so I know he was probably at least in his 50s or 60s. And his superior was very wise and said, Charbel has earned this through years and years of trial and suffering and of living a life of prayer and of much spiritual growth. But the hermit life was only given to those who had learned over a long period of time. And that tends to be the way it is today. The hermit life is very difficult. I have found it to be extremely challenging, and I'm still working out um, the details through prayer and through circumstance and what His real presence allows and doesn't allow for me personally. And once again, I have come to feel that in some ways the canonical approval process is already rather tainted and cheapened somehow by the wide variety of interpretations by the many different bishops. And somehow it seems to me that God knows and God calls, just as He did the Old Testament prophets or any of the hermits, um, through a natural process deep within, and also through trial and error that is quite humbling. I found this poem that I wrote that I want to share. It was during a time period where the Lord was letting me know that I was more His prisoner, a prisoner of love, and that the prison was not a negative. This was shortly after I was confirmed a Catholic within the first year. I wrote it back in 1996, and it wasn't me writing it. It was really His real presence. And I simply wrote at my laptop, and this is what He was saying to me, because I had questions. In my prison, you are taught to appreciate each present moment and what it contains. You learn to accept whatever is given you: hardships, loneliness, deprivations, pain, embarrassment, and the truth about who you are, as humiliating as that may be. Furthermore, you are taught to let go, as you call it, and you did ask me to teach you how to let go, did you not? And even now you are having to let go of doubts, as you wonder if this is truly me speaking to you, since it seems so easy, and you say, I'm not even in an altered state. But that is another lesson you will learn quite well in prison. I don't have to be phenomenal either. I can come to you as easy as 1, 2, 3. Just believe and rejoice. Don't be concerned with being a model prisoner. You are my sweet child who pleases me even when you despair that you've messed up for God, as you say. Rejoice. It is I who gave you that despair. It is I who love you. But it is I who must train you now. And yes, the training is accelerated to suit my little butterfly's wings, which tend to flutter quickly and uncontrolled without my tender, loving chains. My prison is not as you would think with your earth mind and earth experience. I set my prisoners free. But first they must grow in my ways of freedom, and yes, again you thought correctly. My freedom, my growth might seem painful from a human perspective, but you are learning that lesson well, my dear child. Repeat, my pain is sheer joy. It matters not if you are a model prisoner, you desire to learn, you desire to pass all your tests, your willingness to study, my ways in all ways presented, your sincerity and attempts to follow my instructions, to the T, as is said, all this pleases me. No need to compete, for you see not your fellow inmates, and you are free to come and go, to accept invitations for short outings, but you must not tarry long outside the prison walls. I desire you safe within, and have much to teach you in the solitude of life inside. Yes, again, you see it right. Inside my sacred heart. You are surprised? Now you are delighted. You are imprisoned in my sacred heart. Believe with unpretentious, simple faith. This is all. And it's good that I'm reviewing some of these poems from 15, 16 years ago because they are guiding me once again to have courage. And I ask all of you, and no matter what vocation you are called, we are all called to remain in His love, for the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit to make their abode in us, and to us to have our abode in them. The three in one, the Trinity, plus one equals us with them. And so do not be too concerned with the rules or the laws that have been created for good reason, I think. If there were abuses that were of concern, or if there were those who desired more the rules and the laws, and who may desire approval within the Temporal Catholic Church, within the world of the Church that is very beautiful and also very necessary, but there's also the pathway of, I guess, a greater path of suffering in some ways, because it means not having a lot of outer approval or guidelines in that sense, but much pain and sorrow and much joy and freedom. And it's, in a way, what we choose based upon what His real presence is speaking to us. And He knows best to which path we're suited. And I guess I always just remember Jesus reminding us the temporal is always passing away. I'm going to reflect upon prison life today with joy and appreciation in the great freedom it brings. God bless His real presence in you, and may your Lent continue to be most arduous and yet most joyful and freeing.